The rain in Bellevue, Washington, has a way of making everything look shiny and expensive, especially if you live in the right zip code. And my son, Rick, definitely lives in the right zip code. Or, at least, he thinks he does. I pulled my 2015 Honda Accord up to the curb of their sprawling, modern farmhouse-style estate. It was a gray car, practical, paid off, and completely invisible next to the line of Range Rovers, Teslas, and Mercedes SUVs parked along the driveway. It looked like a smudge on a pristine painting. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hair was neat, pulled back in a sensible bun. I wasn't wearing designer labels. I was wearing my favorite LL Bean fleece and comfortable slacks. To the outside world, and certainly to my daughter-in-law, Cindy, I looked exactly like what I was, a 72-year-old widow living on a fixed income in a small condo. I reached into the passenger seat and picked up the package. It wasn't wrapped in glossy foil paper. It was wrapped in simple brown butcher paper, tied with a piece of twine. Inside was 6 months of my life. It was Tyler's 5th birthday. For a grandmother, that's a milestone. It's the age where they start remembering things. And I wanted him to remember this. I had spent every evening since last November sitting in my armchair, stitching. It wasn't just a blanket. It was a memory quilt. I had gone into the attic and found the boxes I saved from when Rick was a baby. I cut squares from Rick's first flannel pajamas. I used the fabric from the shirt Rick wore on his first day of kindergarten. I even incorporated a small patch from my late husband's favorite denim work shirt. Every stitch was done by hand. Every square told a story of our family's history, of the love that had protected my son and was now supposed to protect my grandson. It wasn't something you could buy on Amazon. It was priceless. At least, I thought it was. I walked up the long concrete path to the front door. I could hear the music thumping from inside. It didn't sound like children's music. It sounded like a nightclub. I rang the doorbell. Cindy answered. She didn't smile. My daughter-in-law is 32 years old, and she treats her life like a magazine spread. She was wearing a white dress that looked terrified of a juice box. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless, and her eyes, as they landed on me, were cold. "Anime," she said, blocking the doorway. She didn't step back to let me in. "You're early. The caterers are still setting up the chocolate fountain." "Happy birthday to Tyler," I said, smiling past her stiffness. "I just couldn't wait to give him this. Is he inside?" Cindy looked down at the brown paper package in my arms. Her nose wrinkled slightly, as if she smelled something bad. "What is that?" she asked. "It's his gift," I said proudly. "I made it. It's a quilt, Cindy. I used Rick's old baby clothes. It has the history of—" "A quilt," she interrupted, her voice flat. She looked around the front yard, checking to see if any of her wealthy friends had seen my Honda. "Anime, look around you." I looked. Through the open door, I could see into the living room. It was filled with mountains of plastic. There was a mini electric car with a red bow. There was a stack of video games. There were boxes of designer sneakers that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "We are trying to elevate Tyler's brand," Cindy said, turning back to me. "We are getting him into the prep school next year. We need him to look the part. We don't want dusty rags." "It's not a rag," I said, my grip tightening on the package. "It's an heirloom. It's handmade." "It's old," Cindy corrected. "And it smells like that mothball closet you live in. Give it here." She held out her hand. I thought, perhaps foolishly, that she was going to put it on a table, maybe hide it away for later, which would have been hurtful, but acceptable. I handed her the quilt. Cindy didn't walk to the gift table. She walked past the living room, past the laughing parents drinking champagne at noon, and walked straight into the kitchen. I followed her, confused. Cindy, where are you putting it? The kitchen was sleek, white marble everywhere, filled with caterers arranging sushi on platters. Cindy walked to the far end, where the large, industrial-style trash compactor was built into the island. She opened the drawer. No, I whispered. I couldn't move. I felt frozen. Cindy looked me right in the eye. She didn't blink. She dropped the brown paper package into the bin. It landed with a soft, heavy thud. Then she pressed the button. Crunch. The sound of the compactor engaging was a low, mechanical grind. I heard the twine snap. I heard the fabric being squeezed against yesterday's garbage. 6 months of stitching. Rick's baby clothes. My husband's shirt, crushed into a cube of refuse in 3 seconds. I watched my daughter-in-law throw my love in the trash because it didn't have a designer logo. Have you ever been judged by how much money you spent instead of how much you cared? If you believe love is handmade, please like this video so we can find each other. The machine stopped. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Cindy wiped her hands on a towel, as if she had just touched something dirty. She walked back over to me. She stood close, invading my personal space, smelling of expensive perfume and arrogance. Let's be clear about something, anime. She hissed, her voice low so the caterers wouldn't hear. I tolerate you because Rick begs me to, but you are embarrassing. You pull up in that junk car. You wear those clothes, and you bring trash into my house. That was my love, I said. My voice was trembling, but not from tears. It was trembling from a rage I hadn't felt in years. That was for my grandson. Your grandson needs a future? Cindy snapped. And you can't provide that. Look at you. You're barely scraping by. If you can't afford a PlayStation or a designer jacket, don't bother coming. We don't want Tyler thinking it's okay to be poor. You're a bad influence on his mindset. She pointed to the front door. You're banned, anime, until you can contribute to his future. Financially, don't come back. I don't want you confusing him with your poverty. I looked past her. I saw Rick standing in the doorway of the living room. My son, the boy whose baby clothes were currently being crushed in the garbage. He had seen it. He had seen her throw it away. He held a glass of champagne in his hand. He looked at me, then he looked at Cindy. He saw the fury in her eyes. And he did what he always does. He looked down at his shoes. He took a sip of his drink and turned his back on me. He chose the path of least resistance. He chose the wife who demanded perfection over the mother who offered love. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I learned a long time ago, in boardrooms filled with men who wanted to see me fail, that you never let them see you bleed. I understand, I said to Cindy. My voice was ice cold. You want Tyler's future to be secure. You want to make sure the people in his life can pay their way. Exactly, Cindy sneered. Glad we're on the same page. Now, please leave before the guests start asking who the cleaning lady is. I turned around and walked out. I walked past the Teslas. I walked past the Range Rovers. I got into my 2015 Honda Accord. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I looked at the house. It was a beautiful house, 4,000 square feet, cedar siding, floor-to-ceiling windows. Cindy thought she lived there because she was successful. She thought she was better than me because she had a lease on a luxury car, and I owned my sedan outright. She looked at me and saw a fixed-income widow who clipped coupons. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know that 30 years ago, I was the only woman in Seattle wearing a hard hat on a skyscraper site. She didn't know that I turned dirt lots into commercial empires. She didn't know that when I retired, I cashed out 8 figures, not 6. I live simply because I want to. I drive an old car because I don't need metal and glass to tell me who I am. But the biggest thing Cindy didn't know? She didn't know who owned her house. 3 years ago, when Rick and Cindy were drowning in credit card debt and facing foreclosure, Rick had come to me begging for help. I didn't give him cash. I knew Cindy would spend it on vacations. Instead, I called my attorney, Mr. Sterling. I had him form a blind shell company called Shadow Pine LLC. I bought their mortgage note from the bank. I am not the poor grandmother they think I am. I am their bank. I am the silent investor who owns the roof over their heads. Every month, Cindy complains about writing a check to Shadow Pine LLC. She calls them greedy corporate vultures. She has no idea she is writing that check to me. I started the engine of my Honda. I looked at the trash compactor through the kitchen window one last time. Cindy wanted a contribution to Tyler's future. She wanted a lesson in finance. Fine. I put the car in drive. I wasn't going to cry over a quilt. I was going to go home, open my laptop, and check the payment status of Shadow Pine LLC. Because if I recall correctly, they were late this month, and the landlord was about to make a house call. I drove away from that house with dry eyes. Tears are a luxury for people who can't fix their own problems, and I have been fixing problems since before Cindy was born. My hands gripped the steering wheel of my Honda Accord. They are older hands now, spotted with age and slightly stiff in the mornings. Cindy looks at these hands and sees a woman who stitches quilts and clips coupons. She sees a grandmother who probably knits in a rocking chair all day. She doesn't know what these hands have built. 40 years ago, Seattle wasn't the tech hub it is today. It was a gritty port city, raining 9 months out of the year. I was 30 years old, a widow even then, with a small child and a degree in structural engineering that nobody took seriously because I wore a skirt. I was the first female commercial developer to break ground in downtown Bellevue. I remember the first day on the job site for the Jacobs Tower. The foreman, a man named Big Mike, who had arms the size of tree trunks, laughed when I walked out of the trailer. He asked me if I was there to take lunch orders. I didn't get angry. I walked over to the blueprints spread out on the table, pointed to a load-bearing column on the schematics, and told him that if he poured the concrete the way he planned, the building would collapse within 5 years. I did the math in my head, right there in front of him. He stopped laughing. We poured the concrete my way. That building is still standing. I spent the next 3 decades turning dirt lots into skylines. I negotiated deals in boardrooms filled with smoke and men who thought they could bully me. I learned to read a contract better than I read a novel. I learned that leverage is the only thing that matters in business. If you have the leverage, you control the room. By the time I retired 7 years ago, my portfolio was worth 8 figures. I cashed out. I put the money into diversified trusts, municipal bonds, and secure LLCs. I have enough money to buy Cindy's entire neighborhood, bulldoze it, and turn it into a park without touching my principal. But I made a choice. I chose the stealth wealth life. I moved into a sensible 2-bedroom condo in a quiet complex. I bought the Honda because it's reliable and gets good gas mileage. I shop at Costco. I wear LL Bean because it lasts. I did this for a reason. When you have money, truly have money, you realize it acts like a magnet for the worst kind of people. It attracts people who love your wallet, not your soul. I wanted friends who liked me for my bad jokes and my quilting, not for my bank account. And I wanted to protect Rick. Rick is my only son. I loved him with a ferocity that terrified me. I gave him everything I didn't have growing up. Private schools, tennis lessons, cars on his 16th birthday. I thought I was giving him a leg up. I was wrong. I was crippling him. I raised a son who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. He met Cindy at a mixer for young professionals. Cindy was beautiful, ambitious, and obsessed with status. She looked at Rick and saw a potential ATM. She looked at me and saw a future inheritance. I saw the way she looked at my jewelry during our first dinner. She wasn't looking at the design. She was appraising the diamond clarity. That was when I told the lie. It was 2008. The market had crashed. People were losing everything. I told Rick and Cindy that I had been hit hard. I told them my investments had evaporated. I told them I was downsizing to the condo because I had to, not because I wanted to. It was a test. It was the hardest thing I ever did as a mother. I wanted to see if they would wrap their arms around me and say, "It's okay, Mom. We love you anyway." They didn't. I remember the look on Rick's face when I told him the news. It wasn't a concern for me. It was panic for himself. He pulled away. The weekly phone calls turned into monthly texts. Cindy stopped inviting me to their dinner parties because I was no longer a trophy mother-in-law. I was a financial liability. That lie broke my heart, but it saved my fortune. It showed me exactly who they were. Rick thinks I'm a broke widow living on Social Security and a small annuity. He thinks the only reason I'm not living in his guest room is because he bravely set boundaries. He doesn't know that the only reason he has a guest room is because I saved him from foreclosure 3 years ago. And then there is Tyler. Tyler is the only pure thing in this entire mess. He is 5 years old, and he has my eyes. He doesn't care about my Honda. He loves it when I pick him up because I let him honk the horn. When I go over there, or went over there before today, I don't bring expensive plastic junk. I bring stories. I sit on the floor with him, and I tell him about how Grandma used to build giant buildings that touched the clouds. I tell him about the cranes and the steel beams. He listens. He asks questions. He calls me Grandma Builder. Last month he asked me, "Grandma, why is Mommy always mad at you?" I hugged him tight. "Mommy isn't mad, sweetie. She's just busy." But she was mad. She was mad because I wasn't funding their lifestyle. She was mad because I was an embarrassment to her brand. And today, she threw that quilt away. It wasn't just fabric. I had sewn a square of Rick's flannel shirt into the center. It was the shirt Rick wore when he scraped his knee, and I carried him home. It was a symbol of the time when I was his hero, not his burden. Cindy crushed it, and Rick watched as I drove down the highway back to my condo. The initial shock began to fade, replaced by the cold, calculating mindset that had served me so well in business. Cindy had made a tactical error. She judged me by my cover. She looked at the Honda and the fleece jacket and assumed I was powerless. She assumed that because I loved them, I would take the abuse. She assumed I was desperate for their approval. She forgot that in commercial real estate, the person who holds the paper holds the power. I thought about the structure of Shadow Pine, LLC, when Rick called me 3 years ago, sobbing that the bank was going to take the house. I didn't hand him a check. I knew Cindy would blow it on a trip to Italy. I told him I couldn't help him directly. Instead, I called Mr. Sterling, my corporate attorney for 30 years. By the note, I told him, "Set up a blind LLC. Do not let them know it's me. Offer them a refinancing deal they can't refuse, but keep the terms strict." Mr. Sterling had warned me, "Anime, mixing family and business is dangerous. If they default, you'll have to foreclose on your own son." They won't default. I had said, "This will scare them straight. They just need a second chance." I was naive. They treated Shadow Pine, LLC, just like they treated me, with disdain. Cindy complained constantly about the predatory lenders who owned their mortgage. She didn't realize that the predator was the woman knitting in the corner at Thanksgiving. I pulled into the parking lot of my condo complex. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. It was paid for. It was quiet. I walked inside and locked the door. I went straight to my home office. It's a small room, but it's the nerve center of my life. I have a dual monitor setup that Rick would be jealous of if he ever bothered to visit. I woke up to my computer. I logged into the secure portal for Shadow Pine LLC. I looked at the payment history. January, late, paid with late fee. February, on time. March, late. April, missed. They were currently 30 days past due. The grace period ended yesterday. Cindy had screamed at me that I needed to contribute to Tyler's future. She told me I was banned until I could afford to pay my way. She wanted money? Fine. I would give her a lesson in finance instead. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Sterling. It was a Saturday, but he always answers for me. Anime, he answered. Everything okay? No, Jim, I said. My voice was steady. We have a problem with the Bellevue property. Did they pay? No, I said. And today, my daughter-in-law informed me that I am no longer welcome on the premises because I am too poor to associate with my grandson. There was silence on the line. Jim Sterling knew exactly how much I was worth. He let out a low whistle. That was a mistake, he said. Yes, it was, I replied. Jim, I want you to check the contract terms. What is the trigger for the acceleration clause? 3 missed payments or 60 days of delinquency allows us to call the full loan due immediately, he recited. They missed April. If they miss May, we can move to foreclose. They are going to Cabo next week. I said, Cindy told me they are spending thousands of dollars on a vacation while they are behind on their mortgage. Then they will likely miss May. Jim said, Good, I said. Prepare the paperwork. I want the notice of default drafted and ready to go the second the calendar turns. Anime, Jim said gently. Are you sure? This is Rick. This is Tyler's home. I looked at the framed photo of Tyler on my desk. He was smiling, holding a Lego tower we built together. Cindy said she doesn't want Tyler thinking it's okay to be poor. I said, She's right. I don't want him thinking it's okay to be irresponsible. I don't want him thinking it's okay to treat people like trash just because they drive a Honda. I'll draft the letter, Jim said. I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of my modest condo. I wasn't just a grandmother anymore. I wasn't just a mother. I was the landlord, and my tenants had just violated the lease. To understand the power I held in that moment, sitting in my quiet condo with my heart pounding, you have to go back 3 years. You have to understand that the house Cindy kicked me out of wasn't just a building. It was a crime scene of bad financial decisions. 3 years ago, my phone rang at 11:30 at night. It was Rick. He was sobbing, not just crying, but that deep, heaving sobbing that sounds like a child who has scraped his knee, except Rick was a 32-year-old man. Mom, he choked out. We're going to lose it. We're going to lose the house. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. Slow down, Rick. What happened? The bank, he said. They served the foreclosure notice today. We missed 4 payments, Mom. I thought I could catch up with my bonus, but the bonus didn't come. And Cindy, well, the credit cards were higher than I thought. I didn't ask how they missed 4 mortgage payments. I knew how. I had seen Cindy's Instagram. That winter, while they were allegedly struggling, they had gone skiing in Aspen. They had leased a new Tesla because the BMW was too old. They were living a caviar life on a tuna fish budget. How much do you need to stop the auction? I asked. 50,000, Rick said, to cover the arrears and the penalties. Mom, please. If we lose this house, Cindy will leave me. It's her dream house. You have money, right? Dad, left you something? Just a loan. I promise I'll pay you back. I sat there in the dark, clutching the phone. I had the money. I could have wired $50,000 the next morning and not even felt it. But I knew what would happen if I did. If I gave Rick cash, it would disappear. It would go into the black hole of Cindy's lifestyle. It would be a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. They wouldn't learn anything. They would just learn that Grandma is a safety net who catches them whenever they jump off a cliff. And I love my son too much to let him stay a child forever. I can't give you the money. Rick, I said. The silence on the other end was deafening. What? He whispered. But you have the condo. Can't you take a loan? Mom, we're going to be homeless. Tyler will be homeless. Using my grandson as a bargaining chip, that hurt. I'm sorry, Rick, I said, sticking to the lie I had established years ago. I'm on a fixed income. I don't have $50,000 sitting around. He hung up on me. No goodbye, just the click of the line, going dead. I didn't go back to sleep. I got up, made a pot of coffee, and sat at my kitchen table until the sun came up. I wasn't going to let my grandson be homeless. I wasn't going to let the bank take the roof over his head. But I wasn't going to hand Cindy a victory either. At 8 a.m. sharp, I called Mr. Sterling. Jim, I said, I need you to buy a bad debt. Jim Sterling has been my attorney since 1985. He didn't ask questions. Which property? My son's house in Bellevue. I said, the bank is foreclosing. I want to buy the mortgage note. But Jim, this is vital. They cannot know it's me. If Cindy knows I own the debt, she will never pay a dime. She thinks family money is free money. We'll set up a blind LLC. Jim said, we'll register it in Delaware, so the ownership records are private. What do you want to call it? I looked out my window at the large pine tree that cast a shadow over my balcony. It was sturdy, quiet, and overshadowed by the flashy new buildings around it. Call it Shadow Pine LLC, I said. It took 2 weeks. Because the loan was toxic, meaning Rick was in default. The bank was happy to sell the note to a private investor for a discount. I wrote a check for the full balance of the mortgage. Then, Mr. Sterling contacted Rick. He didn't say, your mother saved you. He sent a formal letter on thick legal paper. It stated that Shadow Pine LLC had acquired the mortgage from the bank. It offered a restructuring plan. We lowered their interest rate to make the payments manageable. We waived the immediate $50,000 penalty and rolled it into the back of the loan. It was a lifeline. It was the kind of deal that never happens in the real world. But I added a clause, a strict, non-negotiable acceleration clause. If the borrower misses 3 consecutive payments or fails to maintain insurance or falls 60 days behind, the lender reserves the right to foreclose immediately without further mediation. I wanted to teach them responsibility. I wanted them to feel the weight of a contract. Rick called me a week later, crying again, but this time tears of relief. Mom, you won't believe it, he shouted. Some investment firm bought our loan. They stopped the foreclosure. We get to keep the house. That's a miracle, Rick, I said, sipping my tea. Who is the firm? Shadow Pine LLC. He said, never heard of them, but they gave us a second chance. Cindy is so happy. She's already planning a renovation for the kitchen. A renovation. They hadn't even made the first payment to the new lender, and she was already spending money she didn't have. That was 3 years ago. For 3 years, I have lived a double life. To their face, I am Anime, the poor mother-in-law who drives a Honda and brings casseroles because I can't afford expensive gifts. But once a month, I am Shadow Pine LLC. I see every check they write. I see when they are late. And I hear the way Cindy talks about the company. Last Christmas, I was sitting in their living room before the ban, and Cindy was complaining to her friends while sipping red wine. Ugh, we can't do the ski trip this year, she moaned. We have to send a check to Shadow Pine. They are such vultures, just greedy corporate bloodsuckers. They harass Rick if the check is 1 day late. I swear, these private equity firms are ruining America. I sat there, knitting a scarf for Tyler, biting my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Greedy corporate vultures. I am the vulture who saved her from living in a rental apartment. I am the bloodsucker who gave her a lower interest rate than any bank in the country. I am the reason she can post photos of her dream home on social media. Every month she writes that check. She thinks she is throwing money into a faceless void. She has no idea she is writing it to the woman she just kicked out of her house. She thinks she has power over me because she banned me. She thinks she can cut me off from my grandson to punish me for my poverty. But she forgot the golden rule of real estate. The landlord makes the rules. I looked at the computer screen in my office. Shadow Pine LLC accounts were open. January payment, late. February payment, on time. March payment, late. April payment, missed. They were walking a tightrope. They had used up all their goodwill. And now they were heading to Cabo for 2 weeks. If they missed May, that would be 3 strikes. I reached for my phone. I wasn't going to call Rick. Calling Rick wouldn't help. Cindy controlled the checkbook. I dialed Mr. Sterling. "Jim," I said when he answered, "it's Anna Mae. I need you to draft a letter. Is everything okay?" "No," I said. "My tenants are becoming a problem. They just damaged the property." "Damaged the property?" Jim asked, confused. "Did they break a pipe?" "No," I said, thinking of my quilt crushed in the trash compactor. "They broke something much more valuable. They broke the family trust. Draft the warning letter, Jim. Remind them of the terms. Remind them that Shadow Pine isn't a charity. If the payment for May isn't on my desk by the 1st, initiate the default." "Anna Mae, Jim warned. If you do this, there's no going back. You'll be evicting your own son." "I know," I said, "but maybe if he loses the house, he'll finally find his backbone." I hung up the phone. Cindy wanted me to contribute to Tyler's future. I was about to. I was going to teach him that actions have consequences. A lesson his parents evidently missed. The silence in my condo the morning after the birthday party was heavy. Usually on Sundays, I would call Rick to ask about his week, or I'd FaceTime Tyler to hear about his cartoons. But today, my phone sat on the kitchen counter like a paperweight. I didn't call. I waited. A mother always waits. We wait for them to walk. We wait for them to come home from school. And eventually, we wait for them to realize they've hurt us. By Monday afternoon, the silence was deafening. I couldn't take it anymore. I swallowed my pride, something I've had to do far too often with Cindy, and I dialed Rick's number. It rang 4 times. Then it went to voicemail. "You've reached Rick. Leave a message." I didn't leave a message. I hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text notification. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't Rick asking if I was okay after being thrown out of his house. I put on my reading glasses and stared at the screen. The words were glowing blue, but they felt like a slap across the face. "Rick, Mom, please respect Cindy's boundaries right now. She's really upset about the scene yesterday. We need space. Honestly, the financial pressure is getting to her. Maybe if you considered selling your condo and giving us the proceeds for Tyler's prep school tuition, she'd reconsider the ban. It would show you're committed to the family." I had to sit down. I read it again. "Maybe if you sold your condo, my son, the boy I raised to be independent, was asking me to make myself homeless to appease his wife. He wanted me to sell the one asset I had left in my own name, my sanctuary, my retirement security, so he could pay for a kindergarten that cost $30,000 a year. He didn't want a mother. He wanted a liquidation event. He thought I was living paycheck to paycheck. He thought that the condo was the only money I had in the world, and he was willing to take it from me. I didn't reply. I couldn't. If I typed what I really wanted to say, I would have burned the bridge to the ground right then and there. Instead, I stood up and walked into my office. I sat down at my desk and worked on my computer. If they wanted to talk about finances, let's look at the finances. I logged into the lender portal for Shadow Pine LLC. Because of the restructuring agreement I forced them to sign 3 years ago, Rick and Cindy were required to upload quarterly proof of income. It was a standard clause for high-risk borrowers, designed to ensure they weren't taking on too much new debt. They had uploaded their documents on Friday, just before the party. I hadn't looked at them yet. I opened Rick's pay stubs. I scanned the numbers with my developer's eye. Base salary, unchanged. Deductions, standard. But then I looked at the line for performance bonus. For the last 2 years, that line had been robust. It was the money they used to pay their credit card minimums. This quarter, $0. I pulled up the accompanying letter from his HR department. Due to departmental restructuring and missed targets, quarterly bonuses are suspended until Q3. Rick had lost his bonus. That was roughly $15,000 they were counting on. $15,000 that wasn't coming. I sat back in my chair. This explained the desperation in Rick's text. They were cash poor. They were drowning again. And instead of cutting back, instead of returning the plastic toys or canceling the caterer, Cindy had thrown a lavish party to keep up appearances. And now they were trying to raid my poverty piggy bank to fill the hole in their budget. Any rational person, seeing that they had lost a significant chunk of income, would hunker down. They would pay the mortgage first. They would eat rice and beans. But Cindy wasn't rational. Cindy was concerned with her brand. I opened Instagram on my iPad. I have a burner account I use just to monitor them. I don't follow them because Cindy blocked me years ago, but her profile is public. She wants the world to see her life. There was a new post, uploaded 20 minutes ago. It was a photo of Cindy's Louis Vuitton luggage stacked by the front door. Next to it was Rick's golf bag. The caption read, "After a stressful weekend dealing with toxic family drama, we need a reset. Airplane, taking a mental health break in Cabo. 2 weeks of sun, sand, and luxury. Hashtag self-care, hashtag family first, hashtag Cabo bound." Toxic family drama. That was me. I was the drama. I looked at the date. It was April 26th. They were leaving for a 2-week vacation to Cabo San Lucas, a vacation that easily cost $10,000. They were leaving 4 days before the first of the month. The first of the month was when the Shadow Pine LLC mortgage payment was due. I did the mental math. I knew Rick's checking account balance roughly based on his pay stubs, without the bonus and after the party, and now with this trip, they didn't have the cash for both the vacation and the mortgage. They had to make a choice. I could almost hear the conversation in their kitchen. Rick sweating, looking at the bank balance, telling Cindy they couldn't afford the trip. Rick saying, "We have to pay Shadow Pine. The terms are strict." And I could hear Cindy's voice, shrill and demanding. "Oh, please, Rick. It's a faceless corporation. Shadow Pine never checks the dates. My mom's friend skipped 3 months and nothing happened. We need this trip. I need this trip. Do you want me to have a breakdown?" She would bully him. She would tell him that Shadow Pine was just a computer system that wouldn't notice a missed payment for weeks. She would convince him that self-care was more important than solvency. And Rick, weak, beaten down Rick, would fold. They chose the vacation. I watched the Instagram stories over the next few days. I saw Cindy drinking margaritas by an infinity pool. I saw Rick golfing on a course that cost $500 a round. I saw Tyler playing in the sand with a nanny they had hired at the resort. They were living like royalty. Meanwhile, May 1st arrived. I sat in my office at 9 a.m. I refreshed the Shadow Pine banking portal. No payment received. I waited until noon. No payment received. I waited until 5 p.m. The business day closed. Status: past due. This was it. They had missed January, strike 1. They were late in March, strike 2. And now they had completely missed May, strike 3. The acceleration clause in the contract was clear. Upon the third event of default, the lender reserves the right to declare the full balance of the loan due and payable immediately and to commence foreclosure proceedings without further notice. I closed my laptop. I walked into my living room and picked up the photo of Tyler from the mantelpiece. He looked so happy in the picture. I wanted to protect him. I wanted to give him the world. But Cindy was right about one thing. Tyler shouldn't think it's okay to be poor. But poor isn't about how much money you have in the bank. Poor is a mindset. Poor is buying Louis Vuitton luggage when you can't pay your mortgage. Poor is treating your family like trash because you think you're better than them. I wasn't going to let Tyler grow up with that poverty of spirit. Rick asked me to respect their boundaries. He asked me to give them space. I was going to give them all the space they needed, specifically the space outside of the house they no longer paid for. They wanted to play games with Shadow Pine LLC. They were about to find out that the pine tree casts a very long, very cold shadow. I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Sterling. "Jim," I said when he answered. "They're in Cabo. Did they pay?" Jim asked. "No," I said. "They posted a picture of their margaritas instead." "That's the third strike, Anime," Jim said softly. "You know what happens next?" "I know," I said. "Prepare the filings. I want the notice of acceleration waiting on their doorstep when they get back." "You're sure?" "I'm sure," I said. "My son wanted me to sell my condo to pay for his life. Instead, I'm going to take his house to save his soul." I spent the next 3 days in my condo, but my mind was thousands of miles away in a Mexican resort. I wasn't jealous of the sun or the margaritas. I was terrified of the lesson my son was learning. I sat in my living room, the blinds drawn against the gray Seattle drizzle. On the coffee table sat a framed photo of Tyler. It was taken last year at the park. He was covered in mud, holding a worm, smiling with a gap-toothed grin that melted my heart. He didn't care about his clothes. He didn't care about brands. He was just a boy. But every day he spent in that house with Cindy, watching her sneer at delivery drivers or throw away handmade gifts, that light in him was dimming. He was being taught that people are disposable. He was being taught that net worth equals human worth. If I did nothing, if I let them skip this payment and just paid the property taxes myself like a good, quiet grandmother, I was complicit. I would be funding the very entitlement that was destroying my family. I realized then that saving my son meant destroying his safety net. I picked up my phone. It was Tuesday morning. The first of the month had come and gone. The Shadow Pine LLC account was empty. I texted Mr. Sterling. "Send it." He didn't need to ask what it was. We had prepared the document days ago. It was a notice of default and intent to accelerate. In the world of commercial real estate, this is the warning shot. It tells the borrower that the game is over. It says, "You broke the contract. Pay the entire balance of the loan in 30 days or get out." I knew Rick and Cindy received it immediately because it was sent by a certified email to their phones, the same phones they were glued to by the pool in Cabo. I waited for the reaction. I expected Rick to call Shadow Pine. I expected him to panic and call the number on the letterhead, which was routed to Mr. Sterling's paralegal. But he didn't call the bank. He called me. My phone rang at 2 p.m. Mom. Rick's voice sounded tinny and breathless, like he had walked away from a party to make the call. Are you there? I'm here, Rick, I said calmly. How is Cabo? Look, Mom, I don't have time to talk about the trip, he stammered. We just got a weird email from that mortgage company, Shadow Pine. They're saying we're in default. They're saying they want the whole loan amount. Well, I said, leaning back in my chair, did you pay the mortgage this month? No, but we were going to pay for it when we got back. Mom, they're talking about foreclosure. It's ruining the vibe here. Cindy is freaking out. I listened closely. In the background, I could hear music. I could hear the clinking of glass. And then I heard Cindy's voice. She wasn't freaking out. She was laughing. Give me the phone, Rick, she shouted. There was a fumbling sound, and then Cindy was on the line. She didn't sound scared. She sounded annoyed, like a woman sending back a salad because the dressing was on the side. Anime, she snapped. Rick is being such a drama queen. Listen, if he asks you for money, don't give it to him. We don't need it. He says you got a foreclosure notice. I said, oh, that. Cindy laughed. It was a dismissive, ugly sound. It's a form letter. It's a bluff. These predatory lenders send them out automatically. I Googled it. Do you know how long it takes to evict someone in Washington state? Years. My mom's friend stopped paying her mortgage in 2012 and stayed in her house for 2 years before the sheriff showed up. Shadow Pine can wait. We are on vacation. Cindy, I said, keeping my voice neutral, I wouldn't bet your house on a Google search. Shadow Pine isn't a normal bank. Private lenders play by different rules. Stop trying to scare us, she said. You're just jealous because you're sitting in the rain and we're in a villa. We'll handle it when we get back. Or maybe we won't. Maybe we'll let them sue us. Rick says you used to be in real estate, but you obviously don't know how the modern world works. Debt is just a suggestion these days. She hung up. Debt is just a suggestion. I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at the blank screen. She was so confident. She was so arrogant. She truly believed that the rules didn't apply to people like her. She thought she could sign a contract, take the money, and then laugh in the lender's face because she knew how to work the system. She thought Shadow Pine was a faceless corporation lost in a sea of paperwork. She forgot that Shadow Pine was a 72-year-old woman sitting in a condo in Bellevue, drinking tea and reading the fine print. She was right about one thing. Commercial banks are slow. They have bureaucracy. They have committees. But I am not a committee. I am the sole managing member. And I don't have to ask anyone for permission to drop the hammer. I opened my iPad again. I shouldn't have looked, but I needed to see it. I needed to confirm that there was no remorse. Cindy had posted again. It was a photo of her and Rick on a yacht. They were holding champagne flutes. Rick looked sunburned and worried, but Cindy was beaming, looking directly into the camera lens with a smirk. The caption read, "Living our best life while the haters stay mad. Some people work for a living, others know how to live. Sorry to all the poor people back home who can't travel because they're too busy counting pennies. Hashtag boss babe. Hashtag Cabo. Hashtag unbothered. Sorry to all the poor people." She was talking about me. She was mocking the woman whose poverty she despised, using the money she should have paid me to buy champagne. She thought she was untouchable because she looked rich. She forgot that looking rich and being solvent are two different things. If you are enjoying this dose of reality, please subscribe. It helps the channel grow. That caption was the final signature on her eviction notice. She wasn't just irresponsible, she was cruel, and she was doing it all on my dime. Every sip of that champagne was paid for by my forbearance. Every night in that villa was funded by my patience. My patience had just run out. I tapped the contact for Jim Sterling. Anime, he answered on the first ring. They think it's a bluff, Jim, I said. My voice was calm, colder than the rain outside. Cindy thinks she has 2 years. She thinks debt is a suggestion. They usually do, Jim sighed. What do you want to do? Do you want to wait until they return and try mediation? No mediation, I said. They are mocking the poor while spending my money. I want to exercise the acceleration clause immediately. Okay, Jim said, we can file the writ tomorrow. But Anime, because this is a private deed of trust with the specific terms we wrote, this moves fast. Once we file, the sheriff posts the notice within 72 hours. They might come home to a padlock. They come home on Sunday, I said. That gives us 5 days. You want to lock them out? No, I said. I want them to get inside. I want them to unpack their Louis Vuitton bags. I want them to feel safe for exactly 1 night. And then I want the sheriff to knock on the door. Understood, Jim said. I'll file the paperwork in the morning. Notice to vacate. Foreclosure of the deed of trust. And Jim, yes, make sure the eviction date is set for the day after they return. I want to be there. I want to be the one to do the final walkthrough. You're going to reveal yourself? He asked. It's time they met the landlord. I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at Tyler's picture again. I'm sorry, sweetie. I whispered to the photo. This is going to be a hard week. But one day, when you're a man who keeps his word and pays his debts, you'll thank me. I went to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. I ate it standing up. I felt strong. I felt focused. For 3 years, I had been the silent partner, the doormat, the poor grandmother. Not anymore. The check had bounced. The grace period was over. Shadow Pine, LLC, was closed for business. The flight from Cabo San Lucas landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport at 1:45 p.m. on Sunday. I know this because I tracked the flight number Rick had posted on Facebook before they left. I sat in my condo, drinking a cup of herbal tea, watching the little airplane icon on my iPad screen slowly descend toward the runway. I imagined them disembarking. They would be tanned, sun-bleached, and probably a little hungover. Cindy would be wearing her oversized sunglasses, looking like a celebrity avoiding the paparazzi. Rick would be dragging the heavy Louis Vuitton luggage, dreading the return to work on Monday. They were coming home to their dream house. They were coming home to the life they curated so carefully for social media. But the house they were returning to wasn't theirs anymore. Technically, the foreclosure process takes time. But the specific contract terms of the private deed of trust held by Shadow Pine, LLC allowed for an expedited writ of possession once the default was accelerated. Because the property was technically held in a specific trust structure we set up 3 years ago to save them, they were, legally speaking, tenants at will who had violated their lease. Mr. Sterling had been busy. On Friday afternoon, a King County Sheriff's deputy had walked up the driveway of their Bellevue estate. He didn't knock because no one was home. He took a roll of bright orange tape and a heavy stapler. He affixed a document to the front door. It wasn't a polite letter in an envelope. It was a neon-bright notice to vacate. It stated in bold black letters that the property had been reclaimed by the lender and that the occupants had 24 hours from the date of service to remove their personal belongings or face forcible eviction. I wasn't there to see them find it, but I didn't have to be. I knew exactly what would happen. It was 3:30 p.m. when my phone rang. It was Rick. I let it ring 3 times. I took a sip of tea. I steeled myself. This was the moment where I had to be the best actress in the world. I had to be the poor widow they believed I was. I answered on the 4th ring. Hello. Mom. Rick's voice was high-pitched, bordering on hysterical. I could hear wind noise, like he was standing on his porch. Mom, are you home? Yes, Rick, I'm home, I said calmly. Did you have a nice trip? How was the weather? Forget the trip, he yelled. Mom, there's a sign on our door. A sheriff's sign. It says we're evicted. It says we have to leave by tomorrow morning. Evicted? I asked, putting just the right amount of confusion into my voice. But you own the house, Rick. It's Shadow Pine, he screamed. Those vultures. I tried calling the number on the notice. I've called 5 times in the last 10 minutes. Nobody answers. It just goes to a voicemail for a legal department. Mom, they're taking the house. They're saying we defaulted. Well, I said slowly, did you pay the mortgage before you left? There was silence on the other end. A heavy, guilty silence. We were going to pay it today. Rick stammered. We transferred the money, but they accelerated the loan. They want the whole thing. $300,000. Today. Or we lose it. Oh, Rick, I sighed. That sounds terrible. It's a mistake, he insisted, though his voice wavered. It has to be a mistake. But Cindy is freaking out. She's inside throwing up. Mom, we can't lose this house. Tyler starts prep school in the fall. We can't be homeless. Then came the pivot. I knew it was coming. The desperation pitch. Mom, Rick said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I need you to help us. I know you say you're on a fixed income, but you have the condo. It's paid off, right? You have equity. I tightened my grip on the phone. Yes, I have equity. You need to get a reverse mortgage, he said. The words rushed out of him like vomit, or a home equity line of credit. Today, right now, if you can wire us $50,000 to cover the arrears and the legal fees, I think I can get them to stop the eviction. I'll pay you back, Mom. I swear. Once my bonus comes in next quarter. I closed my eyes. A reverse mortgage. He was asking me to sell my future security to pay for his past mistakes. He was asking me to put my home, the one modest thing I owned, at risk to bail out the people who banned me from seeing my grandson because my quilt wasn't fancy enough. He didn't want a mother. He wanted a line of credit. Rick, I said softly, you want me to take a loan against my home? It's the only way, he cried. We're family, Mom. You help your family. I tried to help my family last week. I said, I brought a quilt. Do you remember what happened to it? Mom, stop, he snapped. This isn't about the stupid quilt. This is about our lives. Cindy is suicidal. Do you want that on your conscience? Just call the bank. Get the money. It was time to play the role Cindy had written for me. I can't, Rick, I said. Cindy was right. Right about what? She said I'm too poor. She said I have nothing to contribute to Tyler's future. And she's right. I'm just a poor old widow living in a dusty condo. I don't have $50,000. I don't have credit. I only have my quilting supplies. You have the condo, he roared. Sell it. Move in with us. We can put you in the guest room. The guest room. I asked, but I thought I was banned, Rick. I thought I was an embarrassment to the brand. Mom, please, he was sobbing now. Don't be vindictive. Not now. I'm not being vindictive. I said, I'm being realistic. I can't help you. Shadow Pine is a business, Rick. You signed a contract. You went to Cabo instead of paying your bills. I can't fix that for you. You're useless, he screamed. The mask slipped. The dutiful son vanished, and the entitled brat appeared. You're sitting there safe in your paid-off box while we lose everything. I hope you're happy. I hope your quilting keeps you warm because you're never seeing Tyler again. He didn't hang up. He dropped the phone. I didn't hang up either. I listened. The phone must have fallen onto the porch table or the floor because I could still hear them. I heard the front door open. What did she say? It was Cindy's voice. It was shrill, terrified and angry. She said no, Rick mumbled. She said she can't help. She's lying. Cindy screamed. It was a primal sound. She has money. She's just hoarding it. That selfish old hag. Does she know who I am? Does she know what this will do to me? I heard the sound of glass shattering. Cindy had thrown something. Maybe a vase. Maybe a souvenir from Cabo. My friends will see the notice. Cindy shrieked. Rick, take it down. Rip it off the door. It's a legal document. Cindy, we can't just rip it down. I don't care, she yelled. If the neighbors see this, I'm ruined. The gala is next week. I'm on the committee. I can't be evicted. Fix it, Rick. Fix it, or I swear to God, I'm taking Tyler and going to my sister's. With what money? Rick shouted back. We have nothing. You spent the last $5,000 on the villa upgrade. Because I deserved a break, she screamed. I work hard. I maintain this image. And your mother, that useless waste of space, she could fix this with a signature and she won't. I hate her. I wanted to ban her. I wish I had burned that quilt in the driveway. I listened to the chaos. I listened to the sound of a marriage crumbling under the weight of financial infidelity. They were blaming me. They were blaming Shadow Pine. They were blaming the economy. Not once did they blame themselves. Not once did Cindy say, maybe we shouldn't have gone to Cabo. Not once did Rick say, I should have paid the mortgage. They were children, spoiled, aging children who believed the world owed them a luxury lifestyle. I reached out and pressed the end call button on my phone. The silence returned to my condo. It was peaceful. My heart hurt for Rick, the boy he used to be, but my resolve for Rick, the man he had become, was harder than concrete. They had 24 hours. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the eviction will be finalized. Mr. Sterling and the sheriff would be there to oversee the lockout. And I would be there too. I stood up and walked to my closet. I pushed past the fleece jackets and the comfortable slacks. I reached into the back where I kept the dry cleaning bags. I unzipped the bag containing my vintage Chanel suit. It was a deep charcoal gray. I hadn't worn it since I sold my company 7 years ago. I pulled it out. It still smelled like expensive wool and authority. Cindy didn't want the poor widow. She banned the poor widow. Tomorrow, she was going to meet the developer. Tomorrow, she was going to meet the landlord. And I had a feeling she wasn't going to like her either. Monday morning in Bellevue arrived with a gray, persistent drizzle, the kind that soaks into your bones. It was 8:55 a.m. The deadline was 9 a.m. I wasn't driving my Honda Accord today. I was sitting in the back seat of a black Lincoln Town Car, watching the raindrops race across the tinted window. Next to me sat Mr. Sterling. He was checking his watch, his leather briefcase resting on his knees. You look different, Anime, Jim said, glancing at me. I feel different. I replied. I wasn't wearing my fleece jacket. I wasn't wearing the comfortable slacks I wore to the grocery store. I had dug into the back of my closet and retrieved my armor. It was a vintage Chanel suit, charcoal gray with black trim, tailored to within an inch of its life. I wore black pumps, not my sensible walking shoes. My hair wasn't in a messy bun. It was blown out, smooth and silver. I wore my diamond studs, the real ones, not the paste ones I wore around Cindy to avoid making her jealous. I looked like the woman who used to stare down union bosses and negotiate 8-figure contracts. I looked like the managing member of a private equity firm. We're pulling up, the driver said. I looked out the window. We were turning into the driveway of the estate. The scene was chaotic. A King County Sheriff's cruiser was parked at the curb, lights flashing silently. A deputy stood on the porch, arms crossed, looking bored. And then there was Cindy. She was standing on the front lawn, still wearing her pajamas. Expensive silk ones, but pajamas nonetheless. She was holding a Starbucks cup in one hand and her phone in the other. She was screaming at the deputy. "You can't come in here," she shrieked, her voice carrying over the sound of the rain. "I know my rights. This is an illegal eviction. I demand to speak to the manager of Shadow Pine, LLC. My lawyer is going to sue this entire department." Rick was sitting on the front steps, his head in his hands. He looked broken. He wasn't fighting. He knew the math. Our car rolled to a stop right behind the sheriff's cruiser. Cindy stopped screaming. She squinted at the black car. She probably thought it was the manager she had been demanding to see. She straightened her posture, put on her Karen face, and marched toward the driveway, ready to bully whoever stepped out. Mr. Sterling opened his door first. He stepped out, opened an umbrella, and walked around to my side. He opened my door. I swiveled my legs out. The heels of my pumps clicked sharply on the wet concrete. I stood up, smoothing the front of my jacket. Mr. Sterling held the umbrella over my head. Cindy froze. She stood about 10 feet away, blinking in the rain. Then she laughed. It was a harsh, incredulous bark of laughter. "Anime," she scoffed. "What are you doing here? Did you take an Uber? And why are you dressed like that? You look like you're going to a funeral." She took a sip of her coffee, shaking her head. "Look, Rick's mom is here," she yelled back at the deputy, rolling her eyes. "Great. Now I have to deal with the sheriff and the charity case. Anime, go home. We are dealing with a legal situation. We don't have time for your little visits. And if you came to beg for money again, Rick already told you no. We aren't giving you a dime." She thought I was there to beg. She thought I was there to ask for a handout. I didn't say a word. I just walked toward her. Rick looked up from the steps. He saw the car. He saw the suit. And then he saw Mr. Sterling. Rick knows Jim Sterling. He remembers him from when his father was alive. He knows Jim is a high-powered corporate attorney who charges $600 an hour. Rick's face went pale. He stood up slowly. "Mom," he whispered. "Mr. Sterling?" "Who is Mr. Sterling?" Cindy snapped. "Is that your Uber driver?" Mr. Sterling stepped forward. He has a voice like gravel, deep and authoritative. "Mrs. Jacobs," Mr. Sterling said, addressing Cindy, "I am not an Uber driver. I am the legal counsel for Shadow Pine, LLC." Cindy stopped laughing. The coffee cup trembled in her hand. She looked from Jim to me, and then back to Jim. You represent Shadow Pine?" she stammered. "Okay, good. Finally. Look, this is a huge misunderstanding. We were in Cabo. We have the money. I need you to tell this deputy to leave. We are not leaving our home." "It is not your home, Mrs. Jacobs," Mr. Sterling said calmly. "The foreclosure was triggered automatically upon the third default. The title has reverted to the lender." "Well, get the lender on the phone." Cindy screamed, "Get the manager. I want to talk to the owner. I'll tell him exactly what I think of his predatory tactics." "You don't need a phone to talk to the owner," Mr. Sterling said. He stepped back and gestured toward me with his hand. "Mrs. Jacobs, I believe you know the managing member and sole investor of Shadow Pine, LLC. Cindy looked at me. She blinked. Her brain couldn't process the data. It was like watching a computer crash. She looked at my old face, the face she had mocked for years. She looked at my Chanel suit. "What?" she whispered. "Anime? That's impossible. She's poor. She drives a Honda. I drive a Honda because I choose to," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried across the lawn like a shockwave. "And I own Shadow Pine, LLC, because I chose to save you from foreclosure 3 years ago." "No," Rick gasped. You bought the note? You're the bank." "I am the bank," I said. I walked past Cindy. She was too stunned to move. I walked up the steps, past my son, who was looking at me like he had never seen me before. I walked up to the deputy. "Good morning, deputy," I said. "I am the owner of the property. I have the deed and the writ of possession right here." The deputy nodded. "Good morning, ma'am. The property is yours. Do you want them removed immediately?" "I want to inspect the premises first," I said. I walked through the front door. The house smelled of stale party food and expensive candles. It was a mess. There were suitcases open in the hallway, spilling clothes from Cabo. There were empty champagne bottles on the counter. I walked into the living room. I looked at the walls. They had painted them a trendy gray without asking permission. Technically, that was a violation of the mortgage agreement, but I let it pass. I walked into the kitchen. Cindy and Rick scrambled in behind me. Cindy was hyperventilating. "You can't do this," she screamed. "You're my mother-in-law. You can't evict us. We're family." I stopped. I turned slowly to face her. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, looking immaculate in my suit, while she stood there in her pajamas, looking small and messy. "Family?" I asked. "Last week, you told me I was banned from this house. You told me I was a bad influence on Tyler because I was poor. You told me not to come back until I could contribute to his future." I pointed to the trash compactor. "Open it," I commanded. "What?" Cindy cried. "Open the drawer." "Cindy." She hesitated, then pulled the handle. The drawer slid open. Inside was a cube of crushed garbage. But right on top, matted with coffee grounds and old sushi, was a patch of blue flannel. It was the piece of Rick's baby shirt. The quilt. I looked at it. It hurt, but the pain was distant now. It was fuel. "I made that for my grandson," I said softly. "It was priceless. And you threw it away like garbage because it didn't have a price tag." "I didn't mean it." Cindy sobbed. "I was stressed. The party was stressful. Anime, please. We have nowhere to go. Tyler has school." "Tyler will be fine," I said. "I have already set up a trust for his tuition. I am contributing to his future, just like you asked, but I am not contributing to yours." I looked at Rick. "I bought the mortgage 3 years ago to save you." I told him. "I gave you a lower rate. I gave you a second chance. And how did you repay me? You spent the money on luxury cars and vacations while I sat in my condo knitting. You mocked me. You let your wife throw my love in the trash." "I didn't know it was you," Rick whispered. "If we had known." "If you had known, you would have treated me better?" I asked. "That is exactly the point, Rick. You should have treated me with respect because I am your mother, not because I hold your mortgage." I turned back to Cindy. "You wanted to teach Tyler a lesson about money," I said. "You wanted him to know the value of things. Well, this is the lesson." I stepped closer to her. She shrank back against the marble counter she hadn't paid for. "You banned me from this house because you thought I was poor," I said. "Now, I am evicting you because you are." I looked at my watch. It was 9:15 a.m. "You have 24 hours," I said. "Take your clothes. Take your personal items. Leave the appliances. Leave the furniture. And Cindy," she looked up, mascara running down her face, "take the trash out when you leave." I turned on my heel and walked out. I walked past Mr. Sterling, who was standing by the door, looking grim, but satisfied. I walked past the deputy. I walked past the Range Rover they would probably lose next week. I got back into the town car. "Where to, Mrs. Jacobs?" the driver asked. "Home," I said. "I have a new quilt to start." I didn't look back as we drove away. I didn't need to. The house was just wood and stone. The home was gone a long time ago. And now, finally, the books were balanced. It has been 3 months since the sheriff posted that notice. 3 months since the illusion of my son's perfect life finally popped like a cheap balloon. They live in Renton now. It's a perfectly nice suburb, about 20 minutes south of Bellevue, but in Cindy's world, it might as well be Mars. They rent a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex that is painted beige and has a shared parking lot. There is no infinity pool. There is no marble kitchen island. There is just real life. I hear through the grapevine, mostly from Mr. Sterling, who handles the lease paperwork, that Cindy's social circle evaporated the moment the address changed. The friends she tried so hard to impress, the ones she threw that lavish party for, didn't stick around when she couldn't host brunch anymore. Her brand turned out to be as flimsy as the plastic toys she filled her house with. I haven't spoken to Cindy. She refuses to see me. She tells Rick that I ruined her life. She doesn't understand that I didn't ruin her life. I just stopped paying for the fantasy she was using to hide from it. But I talked to Rick. He came to see me last week at my condo. He drove the Tesla, which is the last remnant of their old life, though I know the lease is up next month and they won't be renewing it. He looked tired. He looked thinner. But for the first time in years, he looked like my son, not Cindy's accessory. He sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee from a mug I've had since the 80s. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. He didn't look at his phone. He looked at me. "I know sorry doesn't fix it, but I really am." "I know you are, Rick," I said. "We were drowning," he admitted, "even before the bonus got cut. We were just digging a hole to fill another hole. Cindy, she just wanted everything to be perfect, and I didn't know how to say no. Saying no is the most expensive word in the English language, I told him, but it's also the most valuable." He nodded. He looked around my modest condo. He finally saw it for what it was, not a sign of poverty, but a fortress of security. "So," he said, taking a breath, "what happens to the house? Did you sell it? I saw the for sale sign isn't up yet." "I didn't sell it," I said. "Are you going to flip it?" he asked. "The market is good." I stood up and walked to my desk. I picked up a thick legal folder. I placed it in front of him. "I didn't take the house to make a profit. Rick," I said, "I have enough money. I don't need yours." He opened the folder. It was a trust document. "The Jacobs Family Trust," he read. He looked up, confused. "What is this?" "I put the house in a trust," I explained. "It is legally designated for Tyler. It is his inheritance. When he turns 25, if he is responsible, it will be his." Rick stared at the paper. His eyes filled with tears. "You kept it for him?" "I kept it for him," I said, "because he deserves a home. But Rick, you and Cindy are not the trustees. Mr. Sterling is. You cannot borrow against it. You cannot live in it. It sits empty and safe until he is ready." "I understand," Rick whispered. "However," I continued, "I am not a monster. I know you are struggling. I know Tyler's tuition is due." I slid a second piece of paper across the table. "I will pay for Tyler's prep school," I said, "and I will provide a monthly stipend to help you and Cindy get back on your feet. It isn't enough for Louis Vuitton, but it is enough for groceries and rent." Rick looked at me, shocked. "Mom, after everything we did, why?" "Because you are my son," I said, "but there are conditions." "Name them," he said instantly. "First," I said, holding up one finger, "I see Tyler every weekend. No excuses. No boundaries. I want Saturday afternoons." "Done," Rick said. "Second," I said, holding up a second finger, "you are going to school." "School." "Financial literacy," I said. "I found a course at the community college. It teaches budgeting, investing, and the difference between an asset and a liability. You will attend every class. You will show me your homework, and you will pass the final exam." Rick actually laughed. It was a rusty sound, but it was genuine. "You're sending me to summer school?" "I am sending you to reality," I said. "You need to learn how to manage money before you ever touch another dime of mine." "Okay," he said, wiping his eyes. "Okay, Mom, I'll go." "Good," I said. "Class starts Tuesday." Yesterday was Saturday, the first Saturday of our new arrangement. Rick dropped Tyler off at the big house in Bellevue. It felt strange to be there. The house was empty now. The furniture was gone. The echoes were loud, but it didn't feel sad. It felt like a clean slate. I sat on the front porch steps. The rain had stopped, and the Pacific Northwest sun was breaking through the gray clouds, making the wet pavement shine like silver. Tyler ran up the driveway. He looked smaller without the mountain of plastic toys surrounding him. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, not the designer outfit Cindy usually stuffed him into. "Grandma Builder," he yelled, running into my arms. I caught him. He smelled like rain and peanut butter. I squeezed him tight, terrified for a moment that he would disappear, that Cindy would pop out of the bushes and throw me out again. But she didn't. I was the landlord. I held the keys. "I have something for you," I said to him. I reached behind me. Sitting on the porch swing was a package. It wasn't wrapped in fancy paper. It was wrapped in brown butcher paper, tied with twine. Tyler ripped it open. Inside was a quilt. I had started it the night I evicted them. I worked on it every night for a month. It wasn't made of baby clothes this time. Those were gone. But I had used fabric from my own stash. Bright blues, deep greens, and a patch of yellow that looked like the sun. And in the corner, I had stitched a small picture of a crane building a skyscraper. "It's a blanket!" Tyler shouted. He didn't ask where the batteries were. He didn't ask if it was a brand name. He just wrapped it around his shoulders and snuggled into the soft cotton. "It's a memory quilt," I told him, pulling him onto my lap. "It's made of stories." "Tell me a story, Grandma," he said, leaning his head on my chest. I looked out at the empty driveway where the Range Rovers used to park. I looked at the garden that was finally starting to bloom because I hired a gardener who actually watered it. "Okay," I said. "Once upon a time, there was a woman who built tall towers, and she learned that the most important part of the building isn't the shiny glass on top. It's the concrete in the ground, because if the foundation is strong, the house will stand." Tyler listened. He traced the stitching with his little finger. I didn't do it to be cruel. I evicted my son to break the cycle. I took away their toys to give them back their lives. Money is a tool, not a character trait. And sometimes you have to tear a building down to the studs to fix the rot inside. Tyler fell asleep in my arms, wrapped in the work of my hands. I sat there for a long time, watching the sun go down over the house I owned, holding the boy who was my true legacy. The books were balanced. The investment was secure. Would you have evicted them or given them another chance? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, never underestimate a woman just because she drives a Honda.